Welcome back to another episode of Dubai Works Business Podcast. This week, I'm joined by a CEO of a big airline, international airline, Air Seychelles. So, really interesting conversation lined up. A quick reminder that today's episode is powered by Zbooni. The Zbooni app gives businesses free tools to start, run, and grow online, accept payments, and build e-store. Create mobile invoices in minutes. And while the interview is brought to you by Zbooni, the guest stories are their own. So, quickly, and our guest will explain in more detail, but Air Seychelles was founded in 1977 as the national airline of the Republic of Seychelles. Its head office is located at Seychelles International Airport on the island of Mahé, and their CEO with us now is Remco Althuis. He joined Seychelles National Airline in December 2017 as the role of interim chief executive before becoming chief executive officer in September 2018. His career has spanning over 25 years, covering the full breadth of the industry from e-commerce to sales, distribution, and marketing. He actually worked with an airline that we'll be familiar with here, Etihad, involved in general manager for China, a massive market, before moving into the European market. So today we're going to discuss the story of Air Seychelles, the impact of the pandemic, and look at what the future holds. Good morning, Remco.
Good morning, Richard. Very nice to make your acquaintance.
Likewise, nice to see you and nice to see that stunning green backdrop behind you.
Yeah, it's very, very lush and green here. We get a lot of rain. So, also a lot of sun, obviously, because we are very close to the equator. But yeah, it's a tropical paradise. Lots of green everywhere.
Amazing. So that's where your head office is, and that's where you spend most of your time. Do you do most of your operations from there?
Yes, yeah. So our head office is basically next to the airport terminal. And the airport itself is reclaimed land. So it was opened in 1972 by the Queen Elizabeth.
Oh, wow.
And it's next to the sea. So if you land here, basically you can see, depending on which direction you come from, the sea on the right side or the left side.
Yeah.
So it's basically a backdrop of mountains, and then the beach is always closed.
Yeah, and it must be a very nice place to work. You showed your screen around there for those listening on the podcast, and on one side you have mountains, the other side you have a sea. So quite a kind of picturesque environment and office.
Yeah, indeed, it's very, very nice.
Very nice. So, Remco, can you touch on the history of the company and the airline and how it's evolved over the last few decades?
Yeah, so like many national airlines, the history of Air Seychelles is closely linked to the development of tourism. And so when tourism became more developed and grew here in Seychelles, the need for connectivity grew with that. For those who don't know, but we are about 4 hours south of the UAE and 2 hours east of Tanzania, so really quite isolated. And because of the history of Seychelles, with close ties to first France and then the United Kingdom, because it was a part of the Commonwealth, historically a lot of our visitors came from Europe. And so in the early days, Seychelles operated a fleet of Boeing 767s, having an extensive network to major European capitals, London and Paris, Frankfurt. And then it has evolved over time, serving the Seychelles market, bringing in guests. And then the business model had to basically evolve with also the development of technology. So new aircraft came in, new shareholder came in. So the Etihad came in as a shareholder in 2012 with a renewed strategy and links to Paris and also Hong Kong, Durban and Düsseldorf. And since I've been here, so since 2017, we have undergone, like many other airlines, another transformation. Because with the rise of network carriers, hub carriers closer to Seychelles, Emirates, Etihad, Qatar Airways, clearly also had they started to provide a lot of the inbound visitors, and that forced us to change. And so since I've been at the helm here, we have given up intercontinental flying because the economic risks associated with doing a 10-hour flight to Paris or London, Frankfurt, are quite high. And as a tourism destination, you always have seasonality. Like you have a lot of people coming before Christmas, but the planes to pick them up are quite empty. And so there was just too much risk. So we changed the strategy, and now we are regionally focused. So we have a fleet of Airbus 320 Neos, brand new ones. One is about a year old, and the other one is about 18 months old. And we serve regional markets like Johannesburg and Mumbai, the Gulf, and also Tel Aviv, which we launched, and then other Indian Ocean islands in our own backyard, like Mauritius, and occasionally we have flights to Madagascar, La Réunion as well. So geographically, we're at a quite a nice location, meaning that we are basically the fastest point, intermediate point between South Africa and India, for instance. So we fly to Mumbai, Johannesburg quite regularly, and then there's people that come here to the Seychelles. But similar to Emirates, we also have connecting traffic flows for people from India going to South Africa, and the other way around, and also India to Mauritius.
Interesting.
And in addition to that, we also have domestic, because the Seychelles is an archipelago of 115 islands. Mahé, where we're located, being the largest one. But you also have the island of Thailand, which has an airstrip where we fly to, in the good old days, up to 25 times a day.
Wow.
Under the pandemic, not quite as frequently, but there's also other islands that we serve with charter operations, and there's quite a few islands that have been developed into resorts. And so upon arrival of international flights out of Dubai, Istanbul, or even London, British Airways, these customers transfer onto our domestic flights.
Interesting. Well, Remco, thank you for explaining that, the full history, and then to try and, because I think people will know the aviation sector and will know it from a user point of view and consumer point of view when they're booking flights, and to understand, to try and have an analogy of, if we're doing domestic or regional flights, we might look at different types of airlines, and if we're doing international flights, there's airlines who specialize in that, and you quite nicely described it there. I imagine that like I told you off air, when my mum traveled to Seychelles from Ireland in 1977, you would have traveled on a national air carrier, whereas that story has changed over the years and it's become different. But obviously it must have been challenging for Air Seychelles because you're not necessarily on a continent with many countries. As you explained, there was isolation. So to kind of, and to stay relevant and repositioning must have been challenging in terms of, we've seen national air carriers, struggle with the changing landscape. So how have you managed to successfully navigate that sort of shift in positioning over the last decade?
Well, I think like any business, you constantly have to reinvent yourself and go with the developments. And clearly with the connectivity to Seychelles improving, which is also linked with a rise in visitor numbers. We have to look, okay, what is the cost base? What is an aircraft asset that we can operate with the maximum potential for positive results? And we found that the number of visitors that Seychelles can host on an annual basis is obviously very clearly linked to the number of hotel beds. Mean that if there's a lot of other airlines coming in, bringing in capacity, that we have no choice but to focus on niche markets. There's always traffic flows that you could find where, like I said, geographically you have an advantage. I mean, from a cost point of view, we are quite competitive cost base. And so, yeah, we've had to look at the ever-changing dynamic. And I think because aviation is a global industry, and it means you have no choice but to look at the global developments, even if you are on a very isolated part of the world and basically with a relatively small home market. And the whole world comes and enjoys the scenery and the beaches and the sea and the climate here in Seychelles. That means that we also have to follow best international practice when it comes to fleet utilization, human resource development, and technology innovation.
Yeah.
And so we have done that and constantly assessing our cost base. Does what we do make economic sense? And if not, we need to change it. And that's what we have been implementing. Because clearly the model we had up until 2017 was no longer sustainable, meaning that if you have an airline that loses too much money, then shareholders want you to change. They have to, otherwise it's just you have to put in more capital. It makes it.
And on that point, is it an independent company, and is there shareholders, and is there, is it important for the national identity to have a national air carrier, or is there sort of a business goal here, independent?
It's owned, like many state-owned airlines, by the government of Seychelles. There was a cooperation with Etihad, which is coming to a close. So Etihad had a part of the shareholding. But since they changed their strategy,
that's changing. Yeah.
So that's 100% government Seychelles owned.
And how you mentioned? Sorry, go ahead.
Also, it was a limited liability company, so it's kind of managed at arm's length from government.
Independent decision making.
Clearly,
yeah.
Very clear in close cooperation. And with the stakeholders here, so with the Ministry of Tourism, the Ministry of Transport, the Seychelles Tourism.
And about that integration, you mentioned at the start that a lot of the tourism led. How intertwined is the brand of Air Seychelles with Seychelles as a tourism destination, and how strategic is that? And how would you describe the brand of Seychelles, but also Air Seychelles?
Well, I think the brand of Seychelles is very high or luxury one. It's a bucket list destination, so it has a very high aspiration level. A lot of people would like to come here. There's a lot of people that go on honeymoon here and then come back to celebrate their silver or golden anniversary. So yeah, it has that value. Clearly, we have the brand of the country on our aircraft, and our livery is a combination of the colors of the country flag, and then with elements of things that like beach and sand, coconuts, and those kind of things. So and birds. There's a lot of endemic birds here.
Wow.
So yeah, we have we're closely associated with Seychelles and clearly out in the market, because the resources are limited, not only the financial resources, but also the just human resources, because the population of Seychelles is not very large. We go to trade shows together and we develop markets together. And so there's alignment from a national level on the strategy.
Interesting. It makes sense to be aligned on that level as well. How would you, Remco, describe, or how do you differentiate the service offering on an airline? What are the things that you look to put in place to make your guests feel special?
Well, we realize, I mean, on the one hand, we have to take into consideration the environment we operate in. And it's a bit technical, but since we are so isolated, flight operations specific. The alternate that we have in case of bad weather here is quite far. And that means that if Seychelles airport is closed for bad weather, and we see that coming during the flight, we have to divert to an airport in Madagascar. And it means that for us in speccing the NEOs, what's very important is the weight of the aircraft, because clearly the lighter the aircraft, the better the economics and the more fuel you can take, and therefore the higher the passenger load. Right? So we have decided to specify our aircraft with 12 business class seats and 156 economy class seats. But for instance, we have decided, instead of to have in-flight screens, to have streaming entertainment through boxes that people can watch on their own device. So we have in-flight entertainment, we have movies, we have music, but the screens in the back seats, in the back of the seats, are too heavy.
Yeah, interesting.
For us well, not too heavy, but basically that comes at an economic cost for us, right? Because that comes at the expense of fuel, and that means in order to maximize the revenue potential on the aircraft in case of diversion, and we've decided to keep it light. So we have a lot of people who travel these days have big phones or big iPads with them anyway.
True.
So what we need, and they have headphones, and so all we need to ensure is that we have entertainment, and then people can watch it themselves. And that has worked quite well, but it saves 500 kilos per aircraft.
Interesting.
And that's basically 500 kilos is fuel or more passengers.
Yeah.
And so we, from a service point of view, we're still a full service carrier. So everybody who flies with us gets a meal and drinks, and we have a business class service that is presented to the customers. They have choice of entrees. And we have wines, we have alcohol. I mean, so all alcoholic beverage, all these things we do have. But on some of the elements of our service, we had to kind of take into consideration the operating environment that we have. That is what I explained just now.
It's fascinating. You've touched on a few of the elements there, but just how difficult is it to run an airline profitably? How hard is it as a job?
There's a question. Well, I think you can anybody who follows aviation and International Air Transport Association numbers understands that it's extremely difficult. No, it's clearly. If you look at the pain points, or it sounds a bit negative, but if you look at the total value chain of tourism or of connectivity, so to speak, the airlines take a lot of risk and they have little reward. And so aviation is inherently very capital and labor intensive.
True.
And it's labor intensive because of the regulatory environment. So you want 2 people in the cockpit, you have 1 crew member per door, that's all prescribed. And then you also need a lot of people for handling. If you look at turnaround of any aircraft, there's a lot of activity. You need people to climb into the hold of a narrow body, to take bags out or to put them in. And even if it's a 777, you have to have a machine that basically a high loader that takes out the containers. So you need people for water, you need people for toilet service, you need people for cabin cleaning, you need people for catering. So it's highly labor and capital intensive. And that in an environment that is volatile, meaning that you have good years, and basically that is the development is a coefficient of GDP development. Because you need discretionary spending to basically for people extra money in their pockets to go on holidays. And in good years they spend more, and then you have a good year, but then the economy goes the other way, or you have an outside shock like a global pandemic. That means that you take on a lot of risk. That's also why governments around the world have intervened and are supporting their national airlines, or even when they're privatized, in order to sustain the industry, because connectivity is clearly a requirement, or condition for economic development.
Mm.
And you maintain that, and you want to keep those jobs. It's often said that for every job at an airline, there are 8 to 10 jobs in the total chain.
Yeah.
Meaning travel agents, taxi drivers, people at the airport, people in taxi shops, people in catering, ground handling companies. So it is difficult to make money. Aviation has been around maybe for a little over a century now, 102, 3 years.
Yeah.
The oldest airlines in the world.
Yeah.
And it's tough, but it's also an economic enabler for tourism and for services. And Dubai is, I think, a great example of that.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, and how you described it, it's just an interesting question because we see so many headlines and different things, and we'll now talk about the pandemic, but you kind of touched on the things you can't control, such as weather or fuel prices and things like that, that it's hard to factor. But before we move to the pandemic, you obviously have a career in this industry. How would you describe the current role, in terms of challenges or opportunities, and what attracted you to Air Seychelles in terms of, working with an international carrier like Etihad, or maybe from your native Netherlands where there's more domestic and obviously well-known carriers there as well. What attracted you to Seychelles, and how are you enjoying the role?
Well, what I alluded to earlier is that this is a marginal industry, so it's quite challenging. And what's interesting is that it is people-oriented and technology-oriented. And I always like to say, you have a lot of opportunity every day to make a lot of people very happy, because most people travel for happy reasons. They go to see a business partner, or they go on holiday, they go to see relatives or friends, or occasionally it's sad if they have to go to a funeral. But most people travel for happy reasons, and
True.
It's a fantastic feeling to be able to kind of bring people together on a daily basis. That is what we do, and because of the margins, it is an ever ongoing quest for improvement and for more efficiency and for doing things better. And like I said, aviation is at the forefront of technological development because it has to. And you have these very complex machines like aircraft, also on the distribution side and on the handling side, and on basically how do you manage your base of components, a lot of logistical work. And it's just exciting to be able to work with teams, and it doesn't matter if it's in China or it's in the Netherlands or in the UAE or here in Africa or the Indian Ocean, to work with a team to constantly see how you can take people on a journey for improvement of results and improvement of customer service. And that's what I find so attractive about it.
Amazing, interesting. There's lots of commonalities. Well, we'll take a quick break, and after the break, we'll hear from Remco about the current state of play in Seychelles. And we're back. So yeah, we were talking a lot about the decisions that goes into the day-to-day running of an airline. But how difficult was the global pandemic when it hit last year?
Well, it was a huge shock to the system. I mean, within a couple of weeks, it all came to a grinding halt. And so if you look at Seychelles as an arrival destination, the first 2 months of last year were actually better than the year before. And so the year was off to a good start, as were we as an airline, after the transformation was starting to yield results. Then, of course, it came to a grinding halt. So we had to, the visitors stopped. So in April, there was no more visitors, no more foreigners coming to the island. And then so our role changed quite considerably from basically bringing in visitors to ensuring that the country still had critical goods, because not only Air Seychelles stopped, but all airlines stopped. Clearly, if you're as isolated as we are, we depend on an outside lifeline for food and for medicine and for things that can't be put on a ship, that are needed quickly. So we became a would say a charter operator, but we changed, like many other airlines, quite quickly and with a lot of agility to tap into the requests that we got to either repatriate Seychellois. So we picked up students from abroad. We have a limitation to what the island could offer in terms of medical treatment. So some medical treatments can't be done here. So people go to Dubai or they go to India. And so we've had flights to India, people undergoing difficult medical treatments. We have helped with fish export, because when the economy came, the tourism economy came to a halt, Seychelles as a country is a fish exporting nation. So we've had outbound charter flights for fish, but also helped to staff the fishing fleet by picking up seafarers from Spain and from France and from West Africa. So in a very short period of time, we've had to kind of develop and find flight plans and information for more than 40 new destinations, because that is kind of what the market asked. Aircraft became there were a lot of aircraft parked, and that means that the utilization of scheduled flights dropped tremendously because a lot of flights were canceled. And so we had a lot of ad hoc business. That means that our team had to kind of, okay, what is this route? We don't know anything there. We don't have to find information about this airport. We have to find a handler. So we worked with a company in Dubai to help us provide flight services. So contracting, ground handling, water and fuel, all those things. And for every flight, clearly also under the regulatory environment, you have to get approval from the regulatory environment. And so you have to do due diligence on new routes and on flight plans. And we've had flights with stops in Cairo to Western Europe, to Bilbao and to Brussels, and to Amsterdam, and we've been to China to repatriate. We've been to Dakar. We've been to Senegal, to Ivory Coast, Abidjan, to lots of different new places.
Amazing.
It was quite exciting, but also a challenge, because you understand our team is quite small. We have relatively small teams in operations control center and flight operations department. So exciting and successful, but it's good. And I think also I'm very proud of the team on how quickly they were able to change from a passenger scheduled carrier to also cargo carrier. And we carried, for instance, also protective equipment and medication in the cabin. And also, in order to be able to do that, you have to get approval from the regulatory environments. We have to, do quite work, follow global standards from International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO.
Yeah.
Safety standards, do work, come up with a plan, do a management of change process, and then provide a document that gives them the comfort that you thought of everything.
Yeah.
And we were able to do that. So that was quite good.
That's amazing. When you described the focus originally on tourism and the national strategy, and then the airline performs a key role with national emergency, but also economical and imports and exports, it shows how important the national airline carrier is to an island like the Seychelles. It's fascinating to hear. Bringing us up to kind of current day and a year on from the pandemic, what were some of the decisions that were made in terms of tourism with lots of factors like quarantine, safety, pandemic response? And how did you plan that? I saw some promotions this week, and I've never seen a reaction like the one on Love in Dubai for a post with the offer to the Seychelles. It feels like the whole of Dubai wants to visit your island at the moment. So it's amazing. But was that obviously strategic? And how have you kind of rebounded from last year?
Yeah, so in basically engaging with our stakeholders, you have to say, okay, what are the historic source markets that we have? And the truth is that historically, 65% of our visitors come from 4 countries in Europe: France, Germany, Italy, and the UK. And most of those people are still under lockdown right now. And that means that if you say, well, we have the ability as a country to reopen, and of course you can only do that if you feel that the citizens are protected. And in Seychelles, there's been a strategy of, okay, we stay closed because we have to get this pandemic, but let's try to get everybody vaccinated as quickly as possible. So when the vaccines became available early in the year, Seychelles, with a population of about 100,000 people, was able to say, well, logistically, it's a challenge, but we can do this. And the numbers are not so high that it's going to take a lot of time, because once you have the vaccines, you have to set up the logistics for the vaccination program, and then you can do this quite quickly. So then it became a question, how quickly could we do this? And the initial thought was by mid-March, we should be able to open, because enough people in Seychelles will be vaccinated. That means that regardless of who comes in, population here will be protected. And ultimately, it was decided a little over 2 weeks ago to open on the 25th of March. With that information, that knowledge in mind.
So today,
who can we expect to come? And so, well, we know that other countries with high vaccination levels will most likely allow their citizens to travel first. And that means that UAE, Israel, and we've developed Tel Aviv Israel as a source market back at the end of 2019 with good results. So we'd focus on that. And then it's also just doing an assessment on, okay, who is our benchmark? Who is doing tourism development quite successfully under these circumstances, which is the Maldives. And where do the Maldives people come from? And let's see, and if we don't have connectivity to those markets, is there something that we can learn from them? So clearly, that led to the decision to say, well, Europe is Europe. We know that the European Union, and I know this from my home country, has purchased vaccines centrally. And that means the vaccination level for most of the EU countries is the same. And that means that it will start to ramp up quite exponentially from basically next week or so. But it's going to take until at least July before a high enough level of the EU countries is vaccinated, to the extent that their governments will say, you can now go abroad. Because they can't constitutionally, in most cases, stop it, but they're definitely not stimulating it either. And that means, okay, if we can't get people from Germany and France, Italy, or the UK short term, we'll have to do something else. And that's why we came up with the plan, okay, there is connectivity with Dubai. Because we operate a NEO, which is quite a cost-efficient aircraft, so the cost per block hour compared to a 777 are lower. That also means that we can stimulate the market by offering very attractive fares. That is what we're doing. We don't pretend to. We don't have first class, and so we are basically targeting a different segment of the market in Dubai than Emirates does. And so that's why there's still people there. We already have the first flight from Tel Aviv arrived today. Wow. Since it reopened, and the first flight from Dubai will arrive on Saturday. And there's also other things that we are looking at. So other source markets and so why reinvent the wheel? And Mumbai, for instance, we have always flown to Mumbai, and now we know that India has a huge population. There's also a segment of the Indian market that is interested in flying to Seychelles for holiday, because there's not that many other places to go. And that's why we have a flight planned for, our flight schedule to Mumbai will start to pick up on the 7th of April, twice a week. And the loads look quite encouraging.
Interesting.
So, that's
amazing. You explained that you explained it so easy to understand, but I'm sure it's quite complicated to make these decisions. Remco, you worked for a Middle East airline. How do you view this market with regards to the opportunity for Seychelles and Air Seychelles? Do you see it as an emerging middle class? Do you see, the kind of tourism numbers from across the Middle East? And I know it's a big region, but do you see that as a kind of a core focus over the next decade or so?
Well, I think it's obvious that once you decide to reduce the risk for the company and have a blueprint with smaller aircraft like the Neo, the maximum flight range of that aircraft is basically the circle of 6 hours around Seychelles. That is then 6.5 hours becomes your ground to cover and basically the markets to develop. And clearly within the market, within those opportunities, the UAE but also other states are quite important going forward. So there's good connectivity to the UAE, Dubai, and Abu Dhabi. But there's also other things that we could look at. And the question is, it's about positioning and segmentation. And if there's opportunities, we'll look at that. I mean, I think for us, potentially in the future, Saudi Arabia, it would be interesting.
Absolutely.
With the development and the opening of that economy. We haven't taken a decision on it yet, but we're clearly looking at those things. I mean, we have South Africa, we're very loyal to that, we always have that. And we have our own backyard, Mauritius and potentially Madagascar. From a source market point of view, India. And we are very optimistic about that. And once we get out of this globally, meaning that travel becomes safe again, and people don't feel that. I mean, what is inhibiting people from travel right now is the unpredictability. And so the regulations with regards to quarantine and testing that you have to do. And so there's a lot of the people that now take flights are the ones that really want to go, also have the means to go, obviously. But are the bravest, let's say the new explorers that say, okay, I'll basically take whatever comes my way, and take a chance because I really want to go outside.
And do you have a forecast or an estimation? I know it's impossible with that we're all going through this and it's still very uncertain times, but do you in the tourism board of the Seychelles envisage a year or a month that we will be back to kind of Q4 2019 numbers?
Well, I mean, to answer your question, Richard, IATA, the International Air Transport Association, thinks that global aviation will be back at 2019 level in 2024. So it's going to take quite a while. The thing is, it's also what I say to the team, clearly IATA is the weighted average of all airlines around the world. And I believe that if I look at Maldives is back at 50% of what it was in 2019.
Hmm.
And I have no reason to think that that is not achievable for Seychelles either. And clearly there's a lot of pent-up demands. There's a lot of people that haven't traveled on holiday for a year. I don't think that money is an issue because people have been able to save a lot of money because they haven't spent it on holidays, theater, movies, restaurants,
True.
Cars. I mean, maybe they've done redecorating their homes, but they haven't really spent it on expensive stuff. So there is huge pent-up demand, and there's more. How do we guide everybody? People want to reclaim their aviation, their opportunities. They want to go abroad and reclaim their experiences. So I'm quite optimistic about it. How quickly? Well, I think Seychelles will beat the IATA forecast. I'm quite confident that the visitor numbers here will be better
before 2024. Yeah.
Before 2024, yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. And the thing is, if you say you have a slow ramp up, so the first quarter of this year is really bad. We can now see that the planes that are coming in and the connectivity improves, so you have more visitors. But I believe that for tourism, this will be back at the historic levels quite quickly. Because it is not, you don't start from scratch, right? You had basically a shock to the system, but the historic demand was there.
Yeah.
It's not like you have to start all over with your market development.
Yeah, definitely. And with Seychelles as well, it's not as if you're wondering to see will business travel return or not. It's very much we do tourism well.
No, not at all.
Yeah, exactly.
Not at all. Not at all.
But
I mean, clearly, because you can't do Zoom. You can't go on a Zoom holiday. You can do a lot of other things with.
No, as much
Zoom, Microsoft Teams or Google Meet or whatever, but you can't experience a swim or snorkeling or the beach or the tropics.
The white beaches.
Maybe with VR, you could.
Yeah, the white beaches of the island you're on at the moment. Yeah, I hear they're stunning, and I would love to visit one day. But just kind of, if we've learned anything, we've learned how unpredictable things can be. And lastly, just to focus on what you see as the kind of challenges and opportunities for the aviation sector, but also for tourism in the future. I kind of remember a kind of a topic of conversation before the pandemic around the airline industry was global shortage of pilots. Now that's not spoken about because obviously things have changed. But what are the things that, we hear about different types of fuel, we hear about different ways of traveling, we hear about different technological innovations. Some are short-term, some are long-term. For you in particular, what do you where do you lay your bets on, and how do you see the aviation industry for Air Seychelles in particular over the next kind of decade?
Well, people, as long as there's been people on the planet, they've always moved and they've always gone abroad, and sometimes for political reasons, sometimes for economic reasons. I think we are very curious by nature, so we like to explore stuff, and that'll undoubtedly continue. So I have no doubts that aviation links will continue to grow and develop. Clearly, there is the number of people on the planet has an impact on basically on the planet right now. That's something that needs to be addressed. So we will need technological developments to help us solve those problems of CO2 emissions. And aviation plays a role there also, although not as large as most people want us to believe. So the share of the carbon emissions of aviation globally are 2 or 3% of all of them. But since we've always been at the front line of technological development, those developments will continue, meaning that you'll have alternative fuels. There's going to be tests with electric aircraft, first on a smaller scale.
Yeah.
I also believe that drone technology is going to take off tremendously.
Amazing.
Because you could have drones are small now, but they could become quite larger in the future.
Mm.
That'll always continue. So people will want to move, people will want to interact, people want to see stuff. We have had same type of propulsion on jet engines for about over 80 years now. It hasn't radically altered, and there's experience now with space travel becoming more affordable, and we'll see what that technological developments will then do with aviation.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at cars, in my home country, 25% of all the cars right now are electric or hybrid cars. Right?
Already.
Who would have thought of that
Wow.
5 years ago?
Mm.
So there are physics problems to overcome.
Yeah.
For which we need scientific breakthroughs. But I have no doubt that those problems will ultimately be solved, and new technology will come our way.
So many things to think of.
Yeah, and now it's called an airline because like for all other fields, airlines will also adopt it. So far, it's been quite iterative. So basically, if you look at the power of a Neo and the power of an Airbus 320neo engine versus what it was 20 years ago. I mean, the ones that we have are 20% more efficient than the previous generation. So with technological developments, these engines will become stronger. But at a certain moment, I think we will have, maybe, I don't know when, whether I will live to see it, but you'll have alternative sources of power. Maybe hydrogen, or for smaller aircraft, electricity. But
so Air Seychelles will live on, but what fuels it might change. Your advice, Remco, to finish on Dubai travelers who are thinking of the Seychelles at the moment: should they rush and book during the current midterm and Easter, or should they wait for the summer? When's a good time to travel?
Well, I mean, it's always a good time to travel because not completely like Dubai, but the temperature here is quite constant. It's about between 28 and 32 degrees every day.
Wow.
And then you have the nights are about 25, 26.
Beautiful.
You have lots of great beaches, beautiful beach, one of the most beautiful beaches in the world. That is nice granite rocks here.
Yeah.
So you have mountains as well, as you can see behind me, very lush vegetation. There's a lot to explore. There's snorkeling, there's beach, there's swimming, there's excursions. You can go mountain climbing, a lot of good diving too. So I would welcome anybody who would like to have a great, relaxing holiday.
Yeah.
To come here and enjoy the rain of Seychelles as well.
Yeah. Amazing.
It's a bit drier now because the rainy season is over. It's a bit drier now, but we still have rain showers every now and then.
Okay. Well, I think you'll have lots of people coming from Dubai over the next few months. In fact, I'm sure of it. Well, thank you so much, Remco, for your time this morning. It's been a fascinating conversation. I've learned a lot, and it'll be great to follow your story in the future.
All right. Well, thank you for your time, Richard. I much appreciate the opportunity, and hopefully we'll meet you here in Seychelles.
Hopefully one day, inshallah. Thank you very much, Remco. Take care. Nice to speak to you.
Bye.
Thank you.